Welcome back to the Ed Morrissey Show podcast. There he is, the prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com, Andrew Malcolm. On the Twitter. And Andrew, it's been a fire hose of activity. We were just talking about it. Today seems slow, but only in comparison.
Yeah.
It's been a wild 2 months. I was just thinking about this. It's been 2 months since Joe Biden declared the Equal Rights Amendment, the 28th Amendment of the Constitution. 2 months. And it seems like ancient history.
It does. It does. It does.
All the dog over that.
Anything having to do with Joe Biden is okay with me if it's ancient history. Yeah.
Ah, well, there you go. It's a fine way of putting it. Fine way of thinking about it, by the way. And the reason why I brought it up is because I was reminded of that when I got up this morning. I saw that Donald Trump had declared that Joe Biden's pardons had been null and void and vacated and all sorts of different things in big capital letters, right?
Yeah.
And I wrote an explanation or explainer post, pretty lengthy, of why I think that you can't do that as a president.
Well, wait a minute. Explain it. Why can't you?
Oh.
It's an auto pen. That's not him signing it.
It is him directing the use of the auto pen. Obama signed laws with the auto pen, and nobody's challenged that. I don't think it's a good idea, by the way. I'm not defending the use of the auto pen. I think the auto pen, if it's used at all, should only be used on,
Souvenirs.
Souvenirs. Yeah, exactly. The Christmas cards. If you send a Christmas card to the White House, you'll get a Christmas card back with the auto pen signature on it. It's fun. It's the same thing with wedding invitations, by the way. If you haven't done this and you're getting married, or you know somebody who's getting married, have them send a wedding invitation to the White House. You will get an RSVP back from the White House. They're very good at this. And it's a nice thing to keep in your wedding album. I mean, that's what you use the auto pen for, right? You're not really supposed to use it. Now, George Bush used it, and he got so much flack over it that he actually reconsidered and then banned the use of the auto pen in the White House.
George Bush?
George W. Bush. Which I thought was interesting. He actually listened to the criticism, decided that there was a good foundation for it, and said, we're not going to do this anymore. Let's stop using this thing. And he was using it for mostly ceremonial, bills, renaming post offices. But Obama had actual legislation that he signed with it. The point of the matter is the president can direct the use of the auto pen. What you're actually arguing over in this instance is agency. Did Biden have the agency to make that decision? And the auto pen really isn't part of that, because you could just slide the thing underneath Biden's finger, or, hand, and he would have signed whatever it was you put in front of him. The question is whether he's aware. And you'd have to fight that out on a case-by-case basis. You'd have to tell all these people who were, first off, you'd have to prosecute the people who were pardoned, whose crimes were being, not prosecuted anymore. And that's only a subset of the people who were actually given clemency. I guess you could also say, well, you got to go back to prison because we revoked your clemency. And it'd end up in courts, and you'd have to prove that the president didn't comprehend what he was doing in each and every instance, right? Not just the president had cognition issues. You'd have to prove specifically he did not intend to pardon Hunter Biden. When everybody in his, I wrote this in the Post, right? Is that your great aunt Gertrude, dead low these many years and voting up to the moment in Chicago, knew that Joe Biden was lying when he said he wasn't going to Biden.
But didn't Robert Hur, that special prosecutor, didn't he say that Biden had a bad memory and was unaware of what was going on? And
he had a bad memory, and that he wouldn't be able to stand up to trial testimony because he had a bad memory. Because he kept saying, I don't remember what year that was. But you'd have to have, in order to invalidate this, you'd have to have him say, I remember not wanting to do this, right? I specifically didn't want to do this. I don't know how my signature ended up on that document. If he got up there and said, I don't recall, well, he's not recalling in 2025, but that doesn't mean he was not competent at the moment of signing, or that the auto pen signed those documents. It would be extremely difficult to prove.
It's a replica of the president's signature signed by a robot.
Yeah.
So anybody could, yeah, anybody could turn on the replica machine and get him to sign a threatening letter or anything. It's not the president signing the document. I don't see it.
But legally it is. Legally, it's the same thing. The auto pen is. I mean, so when I briefly and very briefly had been a notary public. I did it because of work. They needed a notary. I applied for it when I was in Minnesota, and I was a notary for a year, so I could notarize documents for for the company I work for. I actually had a stamp made up with my signature, and somebody told me after they saw it, after they saw me use it, which was legal, they said, if somebody gets that stamp and starts using your signature on stuff, that's going to be a legal document. You're going to have to prove that you didn't intend to sign those things. And I destroyed the stamp because later it occurred to me that that's not a good idea, right? Auto pen's the same sort of thing. It really is not a good idea. It shouldn't be used. But that being said, that doesn't make these.
And and look, the President Biden is so busy that he can't sign a piece of legislation himself. I mean, come on.
I agree. It's dumb to use it, but it is not disqualifying to use it. You'd have to prove that he was incompetent at the point when each of those documents were signed in order for them to be reversed. And then later today, they kind of backed off of that a little bit. They were trolling. And Carolyn Levitt got up and said, well, we were just begging the question because, we wanted to see if you guys were paying attention. You guys should ask the Biden people whether or not he was competent. That's what we want you to do. Go ask Biden people if he was competent when he was doing those things.
Yeah. Well, I'm not a lawyer, and I wouldn't have made one, but
lawyers are disagreeing with me. Their lawyers are out there saying, "Yeah, let's have this." Aaron Walker over at Twitchy, "Yeah, let's do this." And he's an attorney. I mean, I'm going to defer to him on specific legal issues, but I just don't see that going anywhere. A judge is going to give a tremendous amount of deference to a president. You're going to have to really come up with a lot of evidence that he was incompetent each time one of those things was signed by an auto pen. And
wow.
It's possible, I suppose, but I'm not sure what the point would be at this, for pardons and commutations, especially. What's the point? I mean,
so you can go after Hunter. Yeah. Well,
I actually don't think it's Hunter, although that'd be fun. Because his was his was both a pardon and a commutation. But I think what they want to go after is Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins. And for good reason. I mean, did you see the New York Times?
Yeah. Jeez.
We were badly misled. I really wanted to talk to you about that.
And isn't the New York Times, among all newspapers, supposed to be a watchdog?
Yeah.
I mean, that's supposed to be the fence.
Well, and it's not like we weren't discussing that there wasn't data on these issues. Tom Cotton in February of 2020 was talking about how the Wuhan Institute of Virology had a lot of problems and that it almost certainly came from the lab because of those problems. And then a couple of months later, Josh Rogan of the Washington Post wrote about it. Jim Garrity at National Review wrote about it. They dug up the State Department reports from 2018, which showed that they were very concerned about the lax protocols at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Now, it doesn't take a genius. I like to tell people, I'm not von Clausewitz, but I can read a map when it comes to, it doesn't take a genius to understand that the epicenter of a global pandemic being centered right on top of a biological research laboratory that is creating novel coronaviruses for research probably is not a coincidence. I mean, and
what were we doing having anything to do with that?
Well, that's the thing. That's the reason why there was this cover-up, is because the people who had decided to do that were Anthony Fauci and Francis Collins, right? Anthony Fauci at NIAID, National Institute for I can't think of what NIAID means.
Infectious diseases.
Yeah, something in infectious diseases. And Francis Collins was head of the NIH, which was he's above that, National Institutes of Health, had decided in 2017 to start putting money back in, or 2018 to start putting money back into gain of function research, which had previously been forbidden because it was dangerous, and everybody understood it was dangerous. And they decided, no, 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 no. We need to see how these things make zoonotic leaps, and so we have to do.
Why? Why? What's
So
the point? To make it a weapon? I mean, that's the only reason.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I'm going to say that this was a cover up with a purpose, and so to have a columnist, mind you, not even the editorial board, which apparently pussed out on this thing, but have one of their columnists go out and say we were badly misled. We were told that we were told by government people that
oh, you got to believe them. Yeah.
Yeah, because that's what the American media has traditionally done, right? Just believed whatever the government told them.
My God.
Honestly, Andrew, help me out here. When did that become the mission of the mainstream media? Just listen to whatever government tells you.
That's right. Yeah. Does that sound like Watergate? No.
Not like the Pentagon Papers? No.
Oh. Jeez. Oh, well, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
And I guess as usual in Washington, there's no accountability.
Well, there's been accountability. I don't know if it's been perfect.
No, there isn't. What happened to Fauci? Nothing.
Oh, I'm talking about.
He's got the biggest pension of the federal government.
Well, he was being paid more than the president was because he'd been around for 40 years. He was actually being paid more than the president of the United States was. It was like $438,000 a year. And he's got this huge pension, and he's got his home, which is basically a monument to his own ego. Somebody was pointing this out to me earlier today, saying,
"Is it a big home?"
Well, it's not so much the size of the home, but he's got portraits of himself all over the place. Oh. There was a documentary done. There's a documentary that had like these glorious portraits of himself all over the place. He actually had I guess an Andy Warhol style, with the four faces and different color. He apparently had one of those. That one I missed, but I did see a couple of the other things and all the tribute stuff that people sent him. He's got it all over his house. So, I mean, that kind of accountability isn't going to happen. But I think the accountability for the media is happening because they're tanking both in terms of economics and in terms of credibility with their consumers. They're hitting rock bottom and digging, and I think what the New York Times is trying to do is they're trying to get out of the way, because now that Trump is in there, they're going to dig up all this stuff, and they're already starting to, right, about all of the the Wuhan stuff. And I remember when people used to say it was racist to say that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's just, I feel like I should go take another shower. It's just so awful. It really is. You think this is our government that we trusted? And there were, remember all the times he was Fauci was up there, the little guy up there behind the big podium, spouting off about what we had the 2 weeks to flatten the curve.
2 weeks to flatten the curve. Yeah. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. And remember the Great Barrington Declaration, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, who's now in the government, right? He's running, I forget which post he ended up with, but he's in there. He got confirmed. He and two other doctors organized the Great Barrington Declaration in October of 2020, saying the masking mandates are incorrect. The shutdowns are incorrect. This is not the way to fight this. And they got pilloried in the media. They were the government, censored them. Big tech platforms censored them. The media refused to cover it. and they turned out to be entirely correct. I mean, you go back and read that declaration, it's a pretty simple declaration. It's still online. They have their own website. Go back and read it, and you realize that, oh yeah, in October of 2020, there were scientists who understood what was actually going on, and nobody would listen to them. And it wasn't just those three. They got a bunch of people to sign off on that thing. A bunch
Yeah.
of different epidemiologists, and no one would even allow the questions to be asked, and including and especially the New York Times, which fired their. Do you remember when they fired the guy that was actually covering stuff like pandemics and stuff like
Yeah.
Don? I want to say Don McLean. That's not correct. Don
Neil McNeil, I think.
Don McNeil. Thank you, Don McNeil. And not because of this, because he had said something on a field outing with some.
Yeah, he said the word Nazi, right?
Said the word Nazi, and everybody got their panties in a twist. They end up firing him. They put in this much younger reporter who apparently doesn't know her ass from a hole in the ground to cover all this. And her coverage was, heaping scorn on anybody who challenged the science, which is, questioning the science is part of what actual science.
That's what science is supposed to do. That's the whole premise.
I mean, and you know what else that is the premise of?
Yeah.
The media.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Question.
Don't question authority. I swear, the media has turned itself into a parody of what people from the 60s thought the media was at that point in time. You remember? I mean, I wasn't there because I'm much younger.
Yes, you are.
Not that much younger. But I mean, do you remember that? I mean, people were saying, oh, you can't trust the media, the corporate media. The media is in with the government, man. Well, they're kind of still saying that to this day, but it's a little bit more true than it used to be. But I mean, the whole 1960 thing was, reject authority, don't trust anybody.
Yeah.
And the media is in bed with government. Well, the media has never been in bed with government as much as it has been the last 15, 20 years. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. I got out at just the right time, unfortunately.
You're in the right spot at the right time.
Yeah. I'm in new media, Ed. You and I.
New media.
Two old guys in new media.
And you'll appreciate this. I was joking around today with somebody on Twitter. It's today, as we're recording this, is St. Patrick's Day, and I'm wearing green. I don't know about Andrew.
No.
Go give Andrew a pinch. He's not.
No, I'm Scottish. I've got my orange underwear on.
Oh, there you go. You got your orange underwear. That's something you need, pal. And I was texting my granddaughter, right, who's graduated from college, and she's telling me about her plans tonight. She's going to go out and see some Irish dancing and hang out with some friends. And I said, well, have a pint of Guinness. And she tweets back, well, if you insist. And I tweeted back, I said, I can't believe I just said that to my granddaughter.
That's right.
Man, I'm old. I mean, it's not like she's legally able to go out and purchase her own alcohol. She has been for a couple of years. And that's a real.
That's fun. That's fun.
A real shot to the nads. That's all I can tell you.
Yeah.
I'm a little on the old side, Andrew, and I'm feeling it today. But I mean, this is absolutely absurd. The idea that the New York Times was victimized by the government because the government lied to them. And I'm thinking to myself, and I didn't use it today, and I should have, is that this is like the most Captain Louis Renault worthy. Yes. Of all my Captain Louis Renault awards, I forgot to use it for this thing. And I really wanted to write a harsh response. And I actually had to dial it down just a little bit. You might be surprised, Andrew, because I ended up putting, rather than the Captain Louis Renault thing, which didn't occur to me at the time, I put in a clip of Della Reese from Harlem Nights. I don't know if you ever saw the movie Harlem Nights.
No.
It's kind of a mess, but it's entertaining. Eddie Murphy, it's the only movie that Eddie Murphy ever actually directed. And it has himself, Richard Pryor, Della Reese is in it, Red Fox is in it. a lot of F-bombs. And there's this one scene where Richard Pryor's gin joint gets raided, right? Because it's set in Prohibition, and he's bailing everybody out. And Della Reese is the woman who runs the hookers, right, for Richard Pryor. And as she's walking out, she comes out and she looks at Richard Pryor and she says, "Kiss my entire ass." Bottom. And I admitted on Twitter that what I really wanted to say was "F you," New York Times, but I was pretty sure my boss wasn't going to let me get away with that.
No, yeah. Gee, though, Pete,
Uh,
it's so embarrassing. And
all
and
right.
and once again, there'll be, I mean, there is accountability broadly, but specifically, it's not like there's well, they got rid of the ombudsman, but that they have an ombudsman who could say, this happened, it happened serially, and what are we going to do about it? But no, there won't be any of that.
Yeah. No.
No.
No. All right. Well, I do want to get to your. We've been sitting here gassing on about all the stuff that I want to talk about, but I want to get to your posts here, your VIP columns, and the early signs of concern for Trump, how to snuff them, is one of them. Joe Biden subverted government with the idea at a cosmic cost in taxpayer money is the other. I kind of want to talk about the Trump one because I think that there's always going to be some risk of alienating voters. And I'd say that Trump actually did that in 2020 with some of the stuff he did around the early moves on the pandemic, which he's learned from. He's learned a lot. I mean, he's really much.
Oh, he's a new man. I mean, he's so much smarter. You see the reporters try to goad him into taking on Mitch McConnell, and Trump says, "No, we're not going to talk about that now." So, he's smart, and I credit Susie Wiles with that
Well,
and growth. He's grown.
I think he's grown too, but I mean, I think he just got experience, right? And he spent
Yeah.
4 years studying it because he knew he wanted to come back. So he spent 4 years studying the issues and the processes where he went wrong, and he thought through all of these things, and he's clearly come back with a much different approach, much more successful approach, I would say, from the first.
Smarter, much smarter. Yep.
Much smarter, not
Discipline,
without missteps.
discipline, discipline.
Yeah, disciplined is a great way, but not without missteps. So tell us a little bit about where you see the risks
Yeah.
and how Trump can mitigate.
Well, first of all, I think most of us want Trump to succeed with his overall program. I mean, there will be nitpicking about individual things, but overall, I think we're all in basic support of what he's doing. There are new polls out now that show Americans really agree with it. We're back on the right track overwhelmingly and so on. There are some polls, however, which indicate, I don't know how to put this, I guess, simmering, to my eyes, because I want him to succeed so badly, that indicates some simmering concerns to me that he could very easily address before they become serious worries. So it's just a concern. And I suggested that, and I went into much more detail, but I suggested that he could have a few, at least, sort of fireside chats like FDR did in the 30s, when there was a lot of fear and a lot of turmoil and a lot of concerns on the part of voters with the new president. They didn't know what he was doing. They didn't understand everything he was doing. And so he would, 31 times during his presidency, he would sit down for 15 minutes or so. And I included the first one he did, which, get this, Ed, 2/3 of all Americans listened to his first fire. Now, this was on the radio. And that's back in the day when they had appointment radio listening, where, Tuesday night at 7, got to hear Jack Benny. And he would come on a Sunday night and talk for 10 or 15 minutes in not highfalutin language, just explaining what he was doing. Now, these were days where banks were failing, people were losing millions in money, and he at times simply closed down all banks. There will be no banking activity tomorrow. So there's a lot of fear. And he would explain what had happened and what he was doing in simple terms. And I think now you can disagree with what he was doing, but in terms of a policy explaining to voters, he can do it. There's no question about having the power, and Trump can do the tariffs. There's no question about that. But preempting unfounded criticism and opposition later by explaining what you're doing now. For instance, on tariffs, okay?
Right.
It's a given. Tariffs will increase prices because the maker and the shipper and the seller all have to pay more. Okay, that's a given. So one of the biggest concerns still now is economics and prices. One of the biggest concerns during the campaign was the same thing. The border is not anymore because the border is basically closed, which is a good thing. So before this becomes, oh my God, he's going crazy. What is he doing? Because it's going to raise prices. And Trump hinted at it to Maria Bartiromo, where he said, well, we're in a period of big transition. We're doing big things, and there might be a period of rocky times. Well, what the hell does that mean? Well, what it means is prices are going to go up. Now, what he's trying to do with the tariffs is drive the manufacturing back to the U.S. so makers can save money and prices can go down because they're making it inside the tariff wall. That's the simple thing. That's not going to happen this year or maybe even next year too. It's going to take a while. Unfortunately, there's an election next year, and before it takes a while, the prices may very well go up. And you want people understanding now why you are doing something so counterintuitive as causing prices to go up. And that was my point, because I want him to keep the congressional majority that enables him to enact all of these anti-woke policies that
Yeah,
he's doing.
that's a good point. It's a good point. And look,
And we got a very tiny congressional majorities.
yeah, I mean, Reagan ran into this problem in '82, right?
Yeah,
Because he had a plan to turn the economy around from well over a decade of mismanagement, right? Of over management. Um, but he knew it was going to create a pretty sharp recession, which was just necessary in order to drive the interest rates down, to get, to reorient the economy on a supply side basis.
yeah,
And I know supply side economics got a lot of bad press from the same media that just got done telling you for the last 5 years that you're a racist if you think that the Wuhan
yeah, yeah,
lab was the origin of COVID-19. But supply side economics works. And the reason why it works is because it boosts
yeah.
production, so that the more you produce, the more goods you have. If demand stays the same, prices come down. That's the whole
So,
point of
yeah,
supply side economics. And he's already applying that in energy, and the prices are already falling in energy. It's a little trickier because there's some market psychology that applies here too, because energy prices are always futures based. So people are betting that we're going to produce more energy, which is the reason why those futures prices are falling. And I think it's a good bet. Doesn't mean it will come to pass though. So it's something to keep an eye on too. Um, but even that, just lowering energy prices, just generating cheaper energy and producing it more abundantly, is going
yeah,
to lower energy prices, which are force multipliers throughout the distribution chain for all the other goods and some services too, for that matter, which means that prices can come down on those, or at least prices will stop going up on
yeah,
those. And so, yeah, I was having the same conversation with, I was having this conversation with somebody, I think it was over the weekend. and they were asking about the stock market. Are you concerned about the stock market? I said, no, I'm not concerned about the stock market. The stock market does this. It corrects. It was probably a little overvalued anyway. There's been a correction there. I would prefer that tariffs be applied, if they're going to be applied in a very calm and consistent manner, because then you've got more reliability and investors feel
Right,
better about putting their
right.
money. But beyond that, I'm not worried about what the stock market does on any particular, 2 or 3 day swing. I'm looking at what the economy is going to do over the next 6 months with these policies, and that's what we need to. That's how you need to judge this. And we're going to know this way before we get to the next midterm election. Were these policies successful? And if they were, Republicans are going to benefit from it. If they're not, they're going to get punished for it. But I don't think we're going to the rapid rate at which these things are being done, which is also part of the reason why there's some instability here, is a little bit different than what happened with Reagan in 81 when he came into office. First off, he was interrupted because of the assassination attempt. So that necessarily slowed down some of the stuff that he was doing. Um, but he managed to get it took him to the next budget cycle to get a lot of that stuff passed. And so you didn't see the benefits of it until after that first full Reagan budget cycle in 81, 82, which ended right before the midterm elections. But after that, in 83, the economy really started to pick up real growth. Interest rates fell dramatically. Energy prices fell dramatically. And we had this huge, robust decade, really almost a decade, of really good, reliable economic growth. And I think Trump sees his way to getting that again, but in a way that promotes a manufacturing economy here in the United States.
And
And we have,
I'm not arguing with the policies at all. I'm just suggesting that you can avoid future trouble by explaining what, just like you did, what you're
yep.
doing now. Just
And I think,
explain it. That's all. And it shows a humility and a difference to voters that you bother, that everybody stands up when you come in the room. But here you are on the radio, which focuses attention on the words. Television focuses the attention on the image. Is his tie straight? It's got wrinkles. Forget that crap. Just the voice where the people can focus on what he's saying simply and directly without any histrionics, why he's doing this, why he's doing something that seems counterintuitive. And I hope he does something, or he or somebody, maybe Vance is a good explainer. He could do that. But I don't know that we're going to have a vice presidential fireside chat.
no, and you're right. I mean, it helps when you do have somebody who can sit down and explain things. And Trump communicates, but that's not the style of his communication. So maybe Vance would actually be a better messenger for that, because I think Vance has a more calming and maybe a little bit more focused speaking style.
Yeah. Anyway, I hope he's successful because we need what he's doing. This woke thing is it's so cancerous. It's just,
I absolutely agree. Absolutely agree. So we got to talk, though, in that same fashion before we get out of here. We got to talk a little bit about what Chuck Schumer went through last week today, and today, because what you just said would have really helped Chuck Schumer out the last couple of weeks too. And he did exactly the opposite of what you need to do in a situation that he found himself in. Now, but we've been covering this ad infinitum at Hot Air and Red State and everywhere else, right? Chuck Schumer screwed the pooch. And the reason he did is because once, so let me back up. The reason why we were on a CR coming out of the Biden term was because Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries just assumed that Republicans would never be able to unite on a spending package, that the caucus was just too fractured, and that the hardliners would never meet with the moderates and produce a budget. And so they just figured that Mike Johnson was going to have to come to Hakeem Jeffries, and that Republicans were going to have to offer a bunch of concessions to get Democrats on board. It was a very bad bet. As it turned out, because Donald Trump was a lot more confident.
Leaderly, a lot more leaderly.
Yeah, he got everybody in line with one exception. With one exception, he got everybody in line in among the House Republican caucus. And I mean, that's saying something. Credit to
Oh
Mike
yeah.
Johnson too, but Trump was the guy who really drove that, right? Well, at that point, Schumer had to know he lost his bet, and John Fetterman even talked about this, right? Is that he said Democrats lost all their leverage when House Republicans came together to pass that bill. At that point, we had no leverage. We had nothing at that point. It was either accept what they just passed or shut down the government, which is exactly what Trump and Elon Musk probably wanted to do in the first place, right? Or at least that was their bluff. Rather than get up on Wednesday afternoon and Chuck Schumer, in the Senate saying, look, there's nothing much we can do about this. The House has already gone home. They've sent us the CR. It stinks, but we can't shut down the government. We don't want to be a party that shuts down the government for all these reasons. Elon Musk, Donald Trump, candidates from outer space, to serve man as a cookbook, whatever you want to say. You just get up and set the expectations properly. We can't stop this, because to stop this would be even worse. So we're going to just take the L and we'll come back on the next budget and try to get more out of the Republicans in the next budget cycle, because we're going to have the ability to do that, because they really want to pass a regular order budget and they will need us to do that. Okay, that's fine. If he'd gotten up and said that, Democrats probably still would have been pissed off at him, right? But that's not what he said. Well, Republicans can't get past our cloture, our mighty, mighty cloture. You're going to have to get with us because, I remember watching Schumer say that on Wednesday, and I'm thinking, what the hell is this guy smoking? There's no way that he's going to be able to do that. And sure enough, within 24 hours, he'd had to completely reverse himself and signal retreat. And I mean,
and it looks so much worse that way.
It does. It makes him look like an idiot, which actually might be true.
Oh, at least it's accurate. Yeah.
But clearly he wasn't thinking too smart last week. At the same time, Fetterman's had a stroke and he's got more sense in his head than Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
And Fetterman's saying, what are you talking about? We can't shut down the government. We've spent the last 20 years telling Republicans they're awful people for shutting down the government, and suddenly we're going to shut down the government. Okay, that makes a hell of a lot of sense. And now Chuck Schumer has gotten his own base so angry that he had cancel his book tour because of security concerns. Did you see this?
Yeah.
This morning?
Yeah.
Who do you think the security concerns are? Because I don't think it's MAGA Republicans. Like MAGA Republicans were going to show up to those events anyway.
Yeah. Well, so he'll have less sales.
You'll have no sales. I mean,
yeah.
And I know. I mean, you've written 10 books. I've only written one, but the time to sell a book is the first 2 or 3 weeks it's out. After that, if you haven't done a book tour by that point in time,
yeah,
good luck. It's going to get buried. So, yeah.
Well, it's embarrassing, and honestly, it couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The guy's a complete strategic moron.
How about this, Ed?
We all need to do it. We all need to do it.
Now somebody should tell him that gives you an air of superiority, a regal air of superiority. Huh?
I'm sure that's why he does it. He feels superior.
Well, I guess you're right, but I'm not sure you want to give that opinion, that impression. Jeez, oh Pete. Anyway, so
yeah,
Trump won, and you know what? In the first term, Trump wouldn't have won.
Nope.
Remember the income tax fight he had with his own Freedom Caucus? It's just so embarrassing that Republicans can't see the big picture sometimes, at least back then. Now, thanks to having a leader like Trump, they can.
All right. Well, you know where that leaves us? It's the jokes of the week.
The joke to the next joke of the week.
Schumer is the real joke of the week, but we got a couple more for you. I have a couple more. I know Andrew doesn't have any today, but I've got a couple for Andrew because I want to make Andrew laugh. So college teachers reminding her class of an exam, and she says, "Now, I'm not going to tolerate any excuse for you not being here tomorrow. I might consider a nuclear attack or a serious personal injury or death in your immediate family, but other than that, no excuse whatsoever." So this one smart-ass student in the back raises his hand and says, "What would you say tomorrow if I said I was suffering from complete and utter sexual exhaustion?" The teacher looks at him and she says, "I tell you to use your other hand."
Oh, oh, oh.
All right. So here's another one. Minister decided to do something a little different one Sunday morning. So he says, "Today in church, I'm going to say a single word, and then you guys are going to help me preach. Whatever single word I say, I want you to sing whatever hymn comes to mind." So the pastor shouted out, "Cross," and immediately the congregation starts singing in unison the old rugged cross. So then the pastor hollers out, "Grace," and the congregation immediately begins to sing Amazing Grace. And then the pastor sings, "Power," and the congregation immediately sings, "There's power in the blood." And then the pastor says, "Sex," and it's really quiet for a moment. And finally, in the back of the church, this 87-year-old lady gets up and starts singing "Precious Memories." All right. Well, jokesoftheday.net. I love to get them from jokesoftheday.net. And so I had those two, and I knew I'd make Andrew laugh with those two.
Yes,
so
you
I
did.
hope I made you laugh too. Andrew.
Yes, yes, sir.
The Prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com. Remind everybody where they can find all your links.
It's not hot air. It's redstate.com and the authors page, and they're all there. Not all VIP, but a lot of them are.
Not all. No, they're not all. And your memories columns are not
yeah.
VIP, and they're awesome. Be sure to check out his memories columns. And you can always go to Twitter at X. Twitter X.
No, we're going to stick with Twitter.
All right, Twitter.
That's better. Twitter. Yep.
At AH Malcolm. That's where you find the Prince of Twitter, the regent of redstate.com. Andrew, thanks so much. We'll do this again next week.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, everybody. See you then.